Welcome everyone to North Somerset's YouTube and Facebook pages. I'm talking today to author Karen Turner, who has 3 novels and a volume of short stories published. And she's made the move from being self-published to having a publisher herself. As well as writing novels, Karen writes articles on business and finance and gives advice to aspiring authors with creative writing courses as well. So there's quite a lot to talk about. Hello, Karen.
Hi, David. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. Do you want to start with your background and tell us about yourself and how you started writing?
Sure. I think I was probably about 10 years old when I first started writing. I wrote my own versions of little golden books. I don't know if you have those in the UK, very small little children's books. And I was writing stories about my family and my brother and my cat and my dog and my school friends and illustrating them very, very poorly. But I created a library of these little books and I thought they were just terrific. Anyway, throughout my teens, I sort of got involved with school and sport and, you know, going out and thinking of a career. And then in my 20s, I fell into financial services right in October '87 during the stock market crash. And I found the dynamics of that very, very fascinating. So I built a career in finance and the financial services industry and eventually started training financial planners. I never wanted to be a financial planner, but I was interested enough in the industry to want to pursue a career in taking it to the next level and training people coming up through the ranks. And part of that involved a lot of writing and development. And I started finding that passion for writing again. However, financial writing is, honestly, it's not very exciting. And my audience, financial planners, I'm sorry to say, we're also not very inspiring to me as a writer. So one day I was trawling through the internet and found a competition for a short story. And so I thought, okay, I'll give this a go. So I wrote a short story, sent it off, and forgot all about it. And about a month later, was told that I'd won first prize. And I thought, well, obviously there weren't many people in that competition. So I started writing some more short stories and seeing how this went, and I was winning more prizes. And I thought, maybe there's something in this. So along the way, I had, just to backtrack a little bit, when I was 19, my grandmother was living in Yorkshire. My mother's side of the family is from Yorkshire. And I was saving up for my first car, but instead of buying the first car, I decided to go to England and live with my grandma. So I moved to Yorkshire and fell in love with, I mean, everything that we all know of God's own country, don't we? The rolling dales and the moors and the countryside and the history and the beauty. And we lived in a village called Otley, just outside of Leeds. And anyway, fast forward again, I'm back in my writing career with financial services and writing short stories. And while all this is happening, a story is germinating, set in Yorkshire. And I started seeing characters and hearing dialogue and seeing the settings. I knew the settings. I'd been to Howard Castle. I knew what I wanted to write about. I'd been to Fountains Abbey. I'd been to all those places. Yeah. So started writing a novel, never really thinking it would go anywhere. But because my short stories had been winning awards, I said to my dad, who was a sketch artist, would you like to do some sketches for my stories? And we'll put together a little coffee table book just for family and friends. And he was chuffed and he said, yeah, great idea. Unfortunately, my dad passed away before he had the chance to do that. So I put that idea on hold. Until about a year later, I just happened to meet a publisher at a function. And he said, well, we'll have a look at your short stories. So we had a look, he had a look at the short stories. He liked them. But when I say he's a publisher, it was a self-publishing event. Yeah. So I spoke to my brother, and we collected a few of Dad's sketches and tried to add them to the stories and made a little book. So the result was All That and Everything. And so it is a collection of short stories. It is available on in ebook, but we only did a short print run in honour of my dad, and it did sell out quite quickly. So there are probably only about 5 copies left in the world that are available. But you can buy it in e-format. Anyway, along the way, the publisher said to me, well, your short stories actually, you know, we sold out of those. So be great if you could write a novel. And I said, well, you know, I have written a novel, but I don't think anyone will want to read it. Yeah. And he said, well, let me have a look at that. So we looked at that, and he decided that he did like it, but again, it was self-published. So he said to me, let's do it. So we did Torn. Yeah. So Torn was my first published novel, and it's available. I don't know if we can see it there.
Yeah.
And that oak tree is very specific. There's a theme of an oak tree running through the story. It's actually a coming of age story of a young girl growing up in a fictional village outside of Leeds called Woolston, but you know, those in the know will know that it's Otley.
Yes. Yeah.
And she's growing up in a blended family during Regency times. Her mother remarries, and she has another brother and another sister, and her brothers go off to fight in the war with various consequences, and she's betrothed to marry somebody she can't stand. And it's really about a story of how women in those days did not have the choices that men have. And as she grows up, she starts to realise that her country life wasn't what she expected it would be when she starts being told, this is how you're going to live. No, you can't go to university like your brothers. No, you can't go off and have adventures like your brothers. Here's your husband, you're going to marry him. So the story's around that, set in beautiful Yorkshire, of course. And at that time, I had also started thinking about the sequel to Torn, and because Torn actually did really, really well in sales, we decided to go with the sequel, Inviolate, which kind of continues the story of what happened after the brothers returned from the war, after, you know, she starts building a future for herself, and how she continues to fight against the suppression that she has as a woman, and how her future is forced upon her. She fights against that for the one thing that she genuinely wanted. There is a huge betrayal. She's betrayed in a massive way at the end of the first book. So it's how the second book is how she recovers from that, and how she fights and takes her life forward in her own terms. So those 2 books have done quite well, and surprisingly, I was more surprised than anybody, I think. But along the way, I started writing the 3rd one in the series. Now, the 3rd one can be read independently because it is a total change, although there are themes that carry forward from the first 2 books. Now, the 3rd one is Stormbird. Yeah. And it is set in the same house. Oh, you've got it. Have you read it?
I have, yes. That's the library copy, that is. So
okay.
You can get it back soon so someone else can enjoy it.
Oh, good. It's set during World War II in the same house, and the themes from the previous characters do carry through. Now, with Stormbird, I really I actually believe so strongly in this book that I thought, I'm not going to go down the self-publishing thing anymore. I think this deserves something more. Yeah. So at the time I was living in Italy. My father's side of the family was Italian, and I have very strong connections in my heart to Italy. So when I need to get down and dirty with my writing, I tend to go and hole up in an apartment in Rome. I rent an apartment and just stay there for a few months while I seriously focus on writing. So I was in Italy at the time that I finished Stormbird, and I started contacting publishers. Now, Stormbird was shortlisted for an award in Australia before it was published. So I thought, well, that's something to hang my hat on. I'll send that around and see what happens. Now, Australian publishers were interested, but they wanted more Australian content. This is clearly British. So I thought, okay, let's look at some British publishers. And I found one conveniently in Yorkshire, almost near where the book is set. So they were quite keen on it for that reason. And then they looked at it and said, yeah, this is great. So they offered me a contract, and I flew over to meet with them in lovely Otley, and the rest is history. Yeah, I signed with them and produced this. They produced this amazing book, and honestly, you'll see that you probably can't see up close. Can't see how I get that on my computer, but you see how you can. The tree theme is still there because the oak tree lives on the grounds of my fictional house, and is a gathering point for the family over the years. And that's why I was particularly keen on keeping the tree, and Fisher King Publishing kept the tree for me. So Stormbird tells the story of a lady whose husband is killed very early in the war, and she's living in the house now, which is aged and a bit dilapidated. She's trying to raise her 2 children on her own. And she comes across a Luftwaffe pilot that's been shot down, and he's hiding in her barn. And there's this moral dilemma about, what should I do? I could turn him over to the authorities, or I could nurse him back to health. Now, my husband was killed. How would I feel if a German woman found him? Would I want her to turn him over to the authorities, or would I want her to nurse him back to health? And once she asked herself that question, she pretty much solved the dilemma for herself and decided to nurse him back to health. Ultimately, it's a love story. It's the ultimate forbidden love story. But because during the time of war, to harbour the enemy was worse than being the enemy. We could understand the concept of being an enemy, but we could not understand our own nurturing the enemy. So when the authorities started to suspect that she had him there, it triggered a series of events that were quite terrifying for her and her family. I mean, at the time, it was quite dangerous. You could have your children taken away. She could be locked up as treason. So it was a very real danger that she faced in looking after him. So that, in a nutshell, are my 4 books. And I'm currently working on the new one, which is set in Australia, I'm afraid to say.
They're not so far to travel for your research then for the new book.
Oh yes, but in lockdown it's not so easy. But they're also historical. I love history very much, and I think that's why I love the UK and Italy. History in Europe is on your doorstep in a way that it just isn't here.
Was the research for Stormbird and also your previous novels, obviously that's very important. How much do you how do you weigh historical accuracy with the needs of a good story?
Well, you know what? Many years ago, I was reading some books by the British author Pamela Bell, and she inspired me so much because her research into history is so thorough that she wove the story around the history, and it inspired me to do the same. So my research is very thorough. I try to be as accurate as I possibly can. Of course, you take a little bit of literary license, but I do try to keep it factual. And so any references to history in so much as it appears in my books is as accurate as I can make it. In terms of history and researching Torn and Inviolate, because they were set in the early 1800s, it meant a lot of books, a lot of visits to libraries, a lot of to and froming to the UK, because I come back to the UK very, very regularly. And even though I may not use all the information I find, it enables me to put myself in that place so I can try to imagine what it would be like in that environment. So, for example, back in the day, gentlemen would wear dress swords. And even though dress swords feature very minutely in my book, it helped me to understand when I started researching them what it would be like to actually wear one of these things. I mean, these things were massive and you've got it hanging off your hip. Yeah. And you're walking. So it's going to change the way you walk. It's going to change the way you sit. It's going to change the way you mount a horse. So as soon as I started thinking about that, it started changing the way I might write something. So even though my readers may not get to learn all about these swords, I knew enough about it to be able to describe certain things, if that makes sense.
It's just a little detail that if somebody does know a lot about dress swords and they read it, they're going to know from research. So it's perhaps not something that everyone would spot, but I think it's important.
That's right, and it gives a level of imagery for the readers, because the whole show don't tell theme that writers are meant to write to. It gives a level of imagery for the reader. For example, when the writer goes to mount a horse and he's got this great thing hanging off him, he doesn't just, leap onto a horse like they do in the Westerns. They have to swing onto the horse. So the word you use, the word I use, he swung onto his horse. The reader may not know why that's important, but they will see him swinging onto the horse. You put your foot in the stirrup and the rest of it swings on because you've got this thing hanging off your hip. So with Stormbird, that was entirely different because it was set in World War II. There's an awful lot of information online. And interestingly, the book is set in Yorkshire 1941. My mother was born in Yorkshire 1941. She was able to tell me what it was like as a little child growing up in Leeds, in the rubble, in the bombings. She had no father. He was killed very early in the war. We suspected Grandma never married, but she never admitted that one. My mum grew up fatherless due to the war, and my grandmother drove ambulances around Leeds while, during the bombing to help rescue people. And the stories that my mother and my grandmother told me while I was growing up, they didn't mean a lot to me as a child. Oh, yeah, you played in the rubble. Oh, you didn't have toothpaste. You used soot out of the chimney and you brushed your teeth in soot. And, those sorts of things didn't mean a lot to me. But as I started researching all of this, my mother and my grandmother are not with me anymore. And it actually gave me such a respect for what people must have been through. Because at that time, when Mum and Grandma would say stuff to me, it would be like, oh, yeah, I see. It was very exciting. Yeah, you lived in the bombings and your houses were blown up and your streets disappeared and there was this and there was that and there was austerity and, everyone had to grow something to eat. These were just family stories. But when I started researching and seeing the images, seeing the photos that you can get of all of this information, it made my family history much more touchable in an interesting way. And I really respect now what my mum and my grandma went through and everybody in those times. So the research was very profound for me, and it also found its way into the book, of course, because it set the scene for my readers.
Yeah, there are lots of little details in it, like you're saying about the similar to the dress sword. There's lots of little details in there that you could only know if someone has told you. I don't think there are some things in there that I think you don't get in books.
No, that's right. My mum, the soot thing with the chimney was interesting because when Mum migrated to Australia when she was 14, and she had beautiful teeth and was picked up as a poster child for a toothpaste ad, and she'd never used toothpaste until she came to Australia.
Did you tell them that?
I don't think so.
You mentioned that your first books were self-published.
Yes.
And Stormbird, you found a publisher for. How much difference did that make to you as a writer to know that you had a publisher behind you?
It's a terrific thing, and honestly, it's the pinnacle that all writers aim for. For me, it represented a huge cost saving because Torn and Inviolate are big books. I wanted them to be done professionally. I wanted people to pick them up on a bookshelf and see them on a bookshelf and think that they were as professionally done as possible. So I spent a lot of money. Stormbird, of course, having a publisher didn't cost me any money, and that was brilliant. That was terrific. The only concern for me with having the publisher was the lack of control that I had over things, and even now I can't do certain things. If I want to have a sale or a promotion, it's very difficult for me to do that. Communication is difficult because for me, I have this one book. This is my latest book and this is my focus. But for the publisher, it's not, because this is just one of many. So, you know, things might not move as quickly as I wanted. Things wouldn't happen when I wanted and how I wanted. So there was that lack of control, but also knowing that there were resources behind me and the ability to reach out to markets that I didn't have. And there's the respectability. There is still a stigma attached to self-published books. And having a publisher's name on the imprint made all the difference. It opens a lot of doors.
You mentioned earlier as well that you have a background in business and financial writing, and you're still doing that at the moment. Do you find that the two types of writing are compatible, or are they?
No.
Have you got to turn your novel head on, if you like, and turn your business head off?
Yeah, it's very much like that. I can't, like, for example, right now I have a deadline on an article that I'm required to do. The deadline is next week, so it's not pressing on me. But I know it's there, and until I get that article out of the way, I can't even think about my novel, because it's a matter of priorities. My novel has a deadline, but it's way, way over there, and this article has a deadline of here. So it's, you know, it is about priorities. To write my novels, I almost feel, and a lot of writers, I think, go through this, where you get this fraud thing going on, where you think, oh, I'm really not good enough. I can't do this. What am I doing? It's just a very time-consuming hobby. I should be contributing more to the family. I feel like the articles, what I do for a living, and the novels are what I do as a hobby. The fact is, it's not the case. But they're not compatible. They're two totally different areas of work. But I have to dedicate separate time to each of them. There is a side of me that is quite serious. So the articles relate to that, whereas my novels come from I don't know, a different part of me, the part that lives with imaginary characters and imaginary friends and imaginary houses, and, you know, whereas the finance is so very structured. There's so many regulations and boundaries that you can't stray outside of. And yet with fiction, you can do whatever you like. It's your world.
What do you do if you get writer's block? Have you got any techniques for getting past it?
Honestly, I don't tend to get it a lot. I mean, they say just start writing, and it's true. You just need to start writing, because particularly when you're writing a first draft, and that's generally when you'll get writer's block. If you're writing a first draft, I think writer's block is what we call lack of confidence, because when you're writing your first draft, you know a lot of it's going to be rubbish. You want it to be perfect, but in reality, it's not going to be. A lot of it's rubbish. You just have to get it down. And I'll be writing away, and then the next day I'll come back and read over it and think, good heavens, that is the biggest load of rubbish I've ever read. it's got to go. But the fact is I got it down, and there'll be parts of it that are fixable, and there are parts of it that I'll just pick up and remove and leave for later on. Then there'll be parts where you look at that and think, oh, that was divine inspiration. I don't know where that came from. So, you know, I don't really think personally writer's block exists. I think it's more around not having the confidence to believe that you can do it. And then, because we need to fail before we get it right. A book will go through 12, 13 drafts before it hits the bookshelves in the shops. So for me, that first draft is going to be full of mistakes. It's not going to work. It's going to have problems. It's going to be, you know, it's not going to be great. And I think a lot of writers struggle with that concept. They want it to be perfect first time, so they're afraid to write. And you just have to do it.
Is this something that you're sort of, because you do creative writing courses? Is this something that you focus on at these on the courses?
Yeah, I don't focus specifically on writer's block, but I do talk about the fraud syndrome, the lack of confidence, and I stress that you need to get out there and do several drafts. I mean, places like Amazon, while they're great for people like writers and anybody to get work out there, for a few $100s, you can publish a book. You can write, you know, 100,000 words, call it done, and publish it on one of these sites and set yourself up as an author. But the fact is, if you haven't edited it, if you haven't gone through a process of redraft and redraft and redraft, it's not as polished as it can be. And that's what I say to people in my courses. Don't be afraid of writing, but just remember your first draft isn't what you're going to go out there with. Yeah. You need, and your work deserves, the best possible opportunity to succeed. So for that, you need to polish it. And that's what I tend to focus more on when I'm doing the courses.
Yeah. Is there such thing as a typical writing day for you? Or does it depend on what you write?
Typically, yes. I laugh because I'm very pedantic about things. If I know there's washing that needs to go out on the clothesline, or there's an errand I have to run in the town, I can't even focus on writing. But my setup is usually coffee, some chocolate biscuits. My cats, I have two rescue cats, but one of them has a bed in my office and she'll come and spend time with me. So once I've got everything all set up, I know I have no chores, I've got no errands to run, I've got nothing pressing on me, no deadlines. I can lose time. I can come in here in the morning and leave in the evening when it's dark and cold and wondering, you know, where did the day go? But I've written a few thousand words. So yeah, I have to have everything just so. And I like my music too. If I don't like music with lyrics, I'll listen to a lot of classical music or piano music or something like that, just to put me in the place, in the zone.
Is there a favourite part of the writing process you have?
Well, opening the box and seeing your book for the first time that can't be beaten. But I really enjoy. I have an editor in the UK, and she's somebody that I chose way back when I was first doing my books as a self-published author, and we work together very closely over Zoom to do final edits on the book, and I really enjoy that process because I enjoy sharing it in that level of detail with another person, because until that point it's just me and the characters, but once she starts getting involved, it's another person validating that, you know, my work is coming along okay. And I do enjoy the sharing with her, the discussions, the character analysis, and how she reviews it and her thoughts on it, and I really do enjoy that.
You mentioned Zoom there, and obviously we're doing this over Zoom.
Yeah.
It's quite difficult for us to meet in person to have this talk, because
Yeah.
is it six in the morning, 6:30 in the morning where you are?
Yes, it is. It is now 6:30. Yes.
7:30.
So my day's about to start. I've already got my running gear on, so I'll be out running around after this.
Yeah, it's at 7:30 p.m. here in England, and it's tomorrow morning where you are, as far as we're concerned.
That's right.
Yeah.
Today is Wednesday morning.
But the point of all this is really that the fact that we're talking over Zoom is a result of the pandemic and COVID-19 and the lockdowns.
Mm-hmm.
Has this had a big effect on your writing, and has it been good or has it been bad?
It's been very interesting because when we first went into lockdown, I had some workshops booked. I had some author talks booked, and they all had to be cancelled. I was in a very fortunate position though, because I travel a lot, and so Zoom, Skype, things like that, I've used for many, many years, whereas a lot of people, they're quite new. So when we first started having to cancel events, my publicist said to me, look, we can take these online, and you know, you've worked online for many years. And I think that we may have beaten a lot of other people to doing this kind of thing, because I suddenly became so busy, it was incredible. And what it enabled me to do was, I don't know if your viewers are aware of the geography of Australia and the distances, but it is, from where I live, possibly about 5 hours on an aeroplane to Perth, about 4 hours on an aeroplane to Brisbane, 4 hours in the car to Melbourne. You know, this is a vast country, and previously I was limited as to where I could go. But once we started going out online, I was doing author talks in Adelaide, you know, like 2 hours away from here by plane in the morning. And then I'd be in Tasmania that afternoon, and then the UK the following morning, and then back to Brisbane the next day. And it's just, it took me to so many places with so many opportunities to meet people that I would never have had. The other thing that was a great bonus was my poor long-suffering husband was my web designer, and I was constantly jumping up and down saying, I don't like my website, I want to change this, I think we need to do this. And the poor guy, he's got a day job. Yeah. And it's not me, I'm not his day job. So I decided I was going to learn how to build websites. So I took the opportunity while at home to build websites. So I designed and built my new website, and now I manage my own website. So get everybody to have a look at karenturner.com.au. I'm very proud of that website. The other thing that I was able to do was to implement, which I wanted to do for so long, a newsletter to subscribers. And I have a few hundred subscribers to my newsletter. And what I decided to do was do a monthly newsletter, set that up to, you know, with all the latest news and things, author talks and workshops and everything that I've been doing, and also offers. And I wanted to offer people something that was book related and not book related. So every month, exclusive to those people that subscribe to my website, they get, or my newsletter, they get these special offers, discounts on my books, discounts on other things, like, you know, people that I know through just businesses are offering discounts to people subscribing to my website and my newsletter. So I was able to implement that. So if people sign up to my newsletter, they get all this information and they get special offers. And that was something I've wanted to do for a long time. Then also, I was always a bit reluctant to take workshops online, because I'm part of my role as a trainer for financial planners was to go out to massive auditoriums and stand in front of 200 financial planners and talk to them about finance and legislation and tax and estate planning and superannuation and all these wonderful, exciting things. Hear the sarcasm. And so for me to facilitate writing workshops, I wanted to be in front of people, and I was facilitating them in front of people, and I could not imagine taking that online, because I loved that interaction with the people in the same room as me, and being able to chat to them and see their faces and their body language and everything else. So I thought, oh, I don't want to take this online. But then when we started taking it online, we found that it was so successful and so easy and so available to people that we're now under pressure to roll out more. So next year there'll be certainly more courses coming out. So it's it has been, while initially it was a mixed thing for me when a lot of my events were cancelled, suddenly I found myself with opportunities that I didn't expect to have, and it's been really, really great. It's been learning, and it's been a chance to meet people and go to so many places virtually that I would never have had the chance to go to.
It sounds very similar to the experience you've had in our libraries, as we suddenly shut off from the public, and the reason why most people join libraries isn't because they like books, it's because they like people and interacting with people all day, and that's been taken away. And now we're learning how to use Zoom, how to edit videos and things like that, and so I think it's a similar process to us. So and of course we're all going to come out at the other end of it, completely changed services. So see how that goes.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm sure you must have been asked this question before, but are there any plans, or has anyone had any interest in Stormbird as a film?
Well, I do. Yeah. And I know who's going to play the lead role too. She doesn't know it yet. A lady by the name of Sophie Skelton, who, for Outlander fans, she plays Bree in Outlander. I've met her, and she's a lovely lady, and she doesn't know it yet, but I've decided she's going to play my Jessica for Stormbird. But no, in seriousness, yeah, I would love it. I do know that there is some interest, but it is so vague and not discussed at this point. Certainly not with me, but I know there are online discussions going on.
It strikes me, I think it would be a fairly simple film to make. Most of it's contained within the one location, within the farm.
That's right.
And then it's only towards the end where it's sort of, I won't spoil it, but you see more of England, shall we say?
Yes, that's right.
So
that's right.
So it could virtually be done mostly in the studio.
Are you offering?
Well, I do know somebody, an Australian filmmaker, but I think he's got other plans. But the one thing about the sort of the location, did you have any particular house or farm in mind when you first wrote the story for the main location?
I've seen it in my mind's eye. And in fact, my husband and I were in Otley for Christmas, just this last Christmas gone. It seems so recent because the world has narrowed.
Yes.
But yeah, and it was interesting because we were driving around going, oh, that could be our Broughton Hall. Oh, that could be our Broughton Hall. But I know exactly what it looks like. And if ever somebody was to say to me, do you want to film it, make a film of Stormbird, then I would definitely have the picture in my mind of what this house looks like, and I could draw it. It is so clear in my mind. honestly, I don't know if it's something that I have seen while I lived in the UK and it's subliminally in the background of my mind, but I know exactly what this house looks like. I even know the floor plan of it. And one day, just for a muck around, I got out a pad and pen and drew the floor plan of my house. It's so real to me. But that could also say something about me that you really didn't need to know.
So you use the English side of your family as inspiration for your novel so far. Any plans to use the Italian side?
A lot of people ask me that. It's funny, I do not feel at all inspired to write anything set in Italy, but I love Italy, and I feel part of my soul is in Italy. So I go there regularly, and when I'm there, I work. I tend to go there alone. I leave my husband and the cats at home, and I go there alone to clear my head. And I have friends over there that I've made over the years. I have my favourite cafes. I volunteer at an animal shelter in Rome. So for 2 days a week, I get out of the house and away from my computer. I go and volunteer and do volunteer work because I speak English and Italian. And the animal shelter there relies entirely on donation from the public. When people visit the centre, they're quite surprised to find an English speaker there. So, you know, it's great for me to be able to talk to them about the cats and the work that's being done there. But also, Italy, I love the history. I love the drama of the architecture. I love everything about it. And all the food, the people, the language. I love everything, but it just doesn't inspire me to write the way England does. And in fact, the book I'm writing at the moment, set in Australia, is not coming as easily to me as books set in the UK have. And in fact, I have other books in my head set in the UK that are clamouring to get out, but I have publishers in Australia saying to me, well, we want Australian content and we'll look at you, but you've got to give us some Australian content. And that's why I'm writing this book set in the Victorian goldfields during the Eureka time, which I'm not sure if your viewers are familiar with the Eureka Stockade, but it was a turning point in Australian mining history. But it's not coming as easily. My heart and my passion lies in British history and writing historical subjects in England.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the new book?
Yes, well, a potted history lesson. In Ballarat, central Victoria, in the 1850s, there was an uprising of the miners against the authority at the time, and they built a stockade. I think 33 men were killed, and it was the beginning of unionised workforces in Australia and unionised gatherings of organised unions. And it changed history for Australia. It changed the way we work as Australians. So the Eureka Stockade was, the Eureka Flat was where it was held. The stockade was this ramshackle stockade that the miners built, and they held out against what they saw as the tyranny of the government. And the government was just charging licence fees and trying to control what was going on at the time, but the miners they rose up against it. Now, my story is set during that time, although the Eureka Stockade itself was one day or only like 15 minutes of history, but it impacts my characters. My character has been, and this is what my research has found, during the time, because there was such a gold rush, men were dropping their jobs in Melbourne and Sydney and the big cities, abandoning their families and rushing to the goldfields to start mining, and their families basically were left destitute. So the women and children were left with nothing while the men were seeking their fortune on the goldfields. So the authorities, one of the reasons they imposed the licence fees, was to try to deter the men from abandoning their families. So what happened with my story was that my character and her daughter are abandoned by her husband, who's gone up to the mines to seek the fortune, but he's not sending money home, and she ends up with nowhere to live. So she makes her way to Ballarat, to the mines, and confronts her husband, and then a series of events happen after that. So for her, it's going to be survival of wits. She's going to have to fight to survive. I've got the whole thing laid out, and I'm not going to tell you what it is. You're going to have to read it when it comes out. But the Eureka Stockade itself features only in so much as there are very two clear sides to both stories, and you know, there are the pro Eurekas and the anti Eurekas. So my character finds herself, because she was abandoned in Melbourne trying to raise her daughter and look after herself and her daughter, she's for the licence fees to deter the men from leaving their homes and abandoning their families, whereas her husband is one of the agitators, and there's a friction and the conflict, and So anyway, it's going to be a love story. It's going to be historical. It's going to be based in fact, but it's also going to be an adventure for how this lady forges ahead.
Right.
I'll leave it at that.
To look forward to then, yeah. We've been going quite a while now, so let's have a final question then for you. Do you reread any of your novels? And are you ever tempted to change anything, or think I could have done that better?
Oh, well, you see, I have read Torn and Inviolate as a reader, and Torn was published in 2013 and Inviolate was published in 2014. And it was only last year that I read them. And I wanted to leave that gap in time because I had to make it clear to myself that I can't change these. You know, they're done.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's interesting because as a writer, you just have to abandon your work and call it done at some point. I have a friend who's a painter, and she said it's the same thing with a canvas. Every time you look at it, you could touch something up, but you just have to draw a line and say it's done and abandon it. So I abandoned Torn and Inviolate, and it was only 5 or 6 years later that I got round to reading them as a reader. And I thought, boy, what if I don't like them? Anyway, I read them and I really liked them, and oh, that was fortunate.
Right.
Would have been quite embarrassing if I thought, oh my God, that was dreadful. But I did enjoy them as a reader. I really did enjoy them. And in fact, my husband and I met some people last night, and one of them said, oh, I've read your books. Oh, I really loved your books. And every time someone says, oh, I read your books, you think, oh, don't tell me if you don't like them.
Well, I've read one of your books and I liked it, so there.
That's great, thank you.
And I especially like the sort of the echoes of the previous books.
Yeah, people have. The first 2 books had quite a following, and I did get some feedback from people. The first couple of chapters of Stormbird, they said, oh, you know, we thought that we were going to meet the same characters and it's not the same. But I think, well, their story was finished, and Stormbird can be read independently, as you've done, or it can be read as the 3rd book in the series. And if you persist with it, there are those themes that carry through from the previous 2 books.
Yeah, I thought it was a very interesting way of linking them. So.
Thank you.
I did enjoy it very much. So.
Thank you.
And I think on that note, we've got you up early today. We've delayed your run, so I think we better let you get back to the rest of the day.
Thank you so much,
Karen. Thank you very much for talking about your books and your writing, and best of luck with the new book, the latest one. And we'll be able to speak to you sometime in the future when that one's published.
Yes, definitely. And hopefully without too much longer, we'll be able to meet in person.
That would be great. Thanks very much. Goodbye.
Thanks, David. Thank you. Good evening to you.